This episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. They are the leading electronic health record system for private practices in the mental health field. They're who I use in my practice, so be sure and check them out, TherapyNotes.com. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 192 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined me. I hope you're having a good August as I'm putting this particular episode out. And, you know, it's hard to believe that fall is just around the corner. I heard advertised some pumpkin spice stuff. I'm not a big fan of pumpkin spice, but it seems like that's more of a fall time thing. But I guess since kids are back in school, people think that it's fall already, but it's not. It's still August. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent here, but anyway, I'm glad you joined me for this particular episode. And this is going to be a solo episode. And one of the questions that I get asked a lot is just around the structure, how to structure your practice. And so what I thought I would do in this particular episode is just walk through with you how I have my practice structured. Not that it is the complete correct way to do things, but it makes sense for me. And I just want to walk you through that kind of how I've got things structured in my practice from the time we receive an intake from a client until the time we discharge them, just kind of all the little things that happen along the way, and particularly on the clinical side, but also the business side of things. So looking forward to you hearing from me, just kind of walking you through all of that. But before we get to that, I'd like to let you know about a few things that are upcoming, some events that are coming up, and also just some new things that I've got coming out. So the first one is that if you listen to the last episode number 191, you heard me talk with Whitney and James Owens about the Enneagram, and they are have put together a full CE course on using the Enneagram in your practice, both on the clinical side of things and also using it with your staff if you're a group practice. So it's really great stuff. I really got interested in the Enneagram this past year and just did a lot of deep diving into that, of really how to use that particular instrument or that particular measure of personality. And what I like about the Enneagram over say the Myers-Briggs, which is really kind of the gold standard for personality assessment. I like the 9 types of the Enneagram, just that I think it's more user-friendly, and also it goes in deeper into the motivation behind why we do what we do or why we see the world as we see it. So anyway, I'm looking forward to you finding out more about this. And if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com, Enneagram course, that'll be a direct link that'll get you to the sign-up page to enroll in that. It's going to be a live course. They are going to teach it live on through Webinar Ninja or something like that. They're going to teach the course, and then you'll have access to it afterwards to continue to use it as a study thing and also get your CEUs. And the dates for that are September 20th and 21st. It's going to be a 2-day kind of event, online event, but I encourage you to check that out. Whitney is a good friend, and James, her husband, is just a gem of a guy. I got to getting to know them better, and they're doing this in conjunction with my friend, Dr. David Hall over at Psych Maven. So anyway, be sure and check that out. The other thing I wanted to let you know about is Killing at Camp. It is coming up in October, and it is an event that is put on by Joe Sanok and the folks over at Practice of the Practice. I'm going to be one of the speakers this year. Again, Last time we did it live was in 2019, but I can tell you that it was one of the best events I've ever been to. And you talk about you couldn't ask for a more beautiful location. It's in Estes Park, Colorado, and which is right. The conference itself is being held at the YMCA of the Rockies. Denver Airport is easy to get in and out of, and the wildlife there, which YMCA of the Rockies is right on the border of Rocky Mountain National Park. I remember just the elk running, just kind of like here in East Tennessee, it would be squirrels, but in Estes Park, it's elk. They're just prolific and everywhere. But anyway, Killing It Camp is really becoming the premier private practice conference. And it is a great place to network and learn from lots of experts in private practice, and also just learn from others and how they're running their practices. And there are several different tracks you can take with this, but if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/killingitcamp, and again, there'll be links in the show notes here, and I'll make sure we have those links up and available. That'll get you to the landing page to register for that. But you might want to hurry because it's going to fill up pretty fast, and want you to grab your spot. We are taking COVID precautions. I've been talking with Joe about that. We're asking everyone that comes to the conference to be fully vaccinated, and we're going to, of course, wear a mask and just follow all the CDC protocols for the conference. So anyway, check it out. It's coming up fast. Oh, I forgot to mention the dates. It's October 14th through 17th. So be sure and check that out. So it's going to be a great conference. And then finally, before we get to my two more things before we get to my discussion about how to set up your practice or how to structure your practice. Be sure and check out the new course that I've got coming out. I'm doing the pre-launch right now, and it's using Google Workspace as a practice platform. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about how I use it in my practice. But the pre-launch of the course that goes into a lot of detail and the nitty-gritty is happening this month during the month of October, and you can get a significant discount on that by doing the pre-launch of that. And you'll get lifetime access to the course, and also get things as they get loaded. So you can go ahead and get in on the front end of that. practiceoftherapy.com/GWS platform. That'll get you to the Teachable page to enroll at the discounted price. So be sure and check that out. And then also, before we get to talking about how to structure your practice, be sure and check out TherapyNotes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that again in this episode here a little later. But TherapyNotes is a wonderful sponsor of this podcast, and you can check them out at practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And be sure and use the coupon code or the promo code, just Gordon, GORDON, and you can try them out for 2 months free. So that's all the announcements and the things I wanted to tell you about before I jump in here and talk about how to structure your practice. One of the things that I get a lot of questions about is just about how to structure things in your practice. And so what I mean by that is get a lot of questions about how to set up systems and processes and the best way to do intakes, the best ways to do documentation, also the best way to set up your pricing structure, also questions about how do you bill clients? How do you file for insurance? All of those things that people ask about and just thinking about running a practice. The other thing I get asked about are, if you were a group practice, what's the best way to pay people and all of those kinds of things. So what I want to do is just kind of give you a walkthrough of how I've got things set up in my practice. And my practice is Kingsport Counseling Associates, and we're a small practice located in East Tennessee. We're in the northeast corner of Tennessee. And I have currently I've got 4 other therapists, one including one intern, that are working for me as employees of my practice. And so they are all licensed people or pre-licensed people. And we mainly work with just a broad range of different issues, anywhere from just individual work around anxiety to doing marital work I do a lot of work with men that are struggling with pornography and sex addictions, also do a lot of work with couples around infidelity, that kind of thing. And then we have 2 of our therapists that work with children. I don't work with children, but that's a whole other story. But, it's a fairly general, practice in that sense. But anyway, I'm going to walk you through just kind of how I've got things set up and maybe hopefully give you some things to think about. One thing I'll say on the front end of this, the way I have it set up is not necessarily the correct way, and I'm using air quotes here, the correct way to set up your practice, but it's what works for me. And I think ultimately that's what you have to figure out for yourself, is what is going to work for you, what makes sense to you, and just thinking about your workflow, how your practice ties into your lifestyle and all of that sort of thing. So anyway, let me walk you through just kind of how we have things set up. As I think about walking through this, maybe the logical place to start is just thinking about how we do our intakes. In my practice, in addition to the other clinicians that are working with me, we also have a part-time intake coordinator, Nikki. And the way we have it set up is that probably the vast majority of people that come to us, usually it's through our website, kingsportcounseling.com. They find our website, they've done a Google search, or they found us on Facebook or any number of places. The other place that our referrals tend to come from, we do get a fair amount of direct referrals from like doctors' offices, that sort of thing, but also insurances. We are an insurance-based practice, and we get a lot of referrals from people that find us in the insurance company directories. And so people will contact us in any number of ways, but predominantly they just give us a call. We have an 800 number and also a regular number. And all of our phone calls are handled through an application that we use called phone.com. And I'm going to include links to all of these things in the show notes of the things that I mentioned here. But phone.com is a HIPAA secure VIOP service for phones. There are a lot of others out there, and I would say just research them to find out what's best. But when I stumbled on phone.com, I was using another service that wasn't HIPAA secure before this, and I thought they were, but they weren't. And so we got to work through that. But phone.com has an app associated with it so that our intake coordinator can just use the app on her phone at home to answer phone calls. And also it's got an automated voicemail system. So when people call in, they can leave us a message, and then Nikki, our intake coordinator, follows up with those. So one thing I'll say about that is that when you're initially starting your practice, and one of the things that happens very quickly for people is when they start to fill up in their practices, usually one of the first things they want to outsource is somebody to answer the phone. So I think it's good to have a system that's accessible from anywhere rather than just having you can have like a dedicated cell phone number, But what I love about a VIOP system is you can access it anywhere. But again, phone.com works for us, and it allows us for people to leave messages. It also allows Nikki to return phone calls from the app so that our work number shows up on people's caller ID, so that she's not giving out her actual cell number. So that's one feature that I like about phone.com. Also, I can set up individual inboxes or voicemail boxes for all of our therapists. And so it's like, it's essentially a virtual phone system that just works really well. There is some setup involved to it, but again, you can check out the links here in the show notes to phone.com, or just simply go to phone.com to check it out. So anyway, that's kind of the starting place for people. Also, they will fill out some of the contact forms on our website. And those are routed to both me and to Nikki. We have an info at kingsportcounseling.com set up through Google Workspace, and it's routed to both me and Nikki in our email. So she gets it first. I'm the backup for that. And then if I'm out of town, I have somebody else back me up on that. So that way, any calls that come in, or any people that ask about our services or want to make an appointment, it gets routed through Nikki first, our intake coordinator, and then I'm the backup, and then other people will back up at various times depending on our situation. So the other tool that we use when we, as far as our structure goes, is Google Workspace. And as anybody that's been listening to me for a while know that I'm a huge fan of Google Workspace. And Google Workspace is what we use for our email system within our practice. It's just through Gmail. And I've got, as I've mentioned before, got a whole course that I'm in the process of getting out there. It's in the pre-launch on how to use Google Workspace as a platform in your practice. And in particularly the business side of it. So things like communication with clients, things like letters, things like what are the other things we use Google Workspace for? Contact forms, intake forms, that kind of thing are all done through Google Workspace. Also, just I use Google Workspace for some of my metrics and some of my dashboards of just being able to track things within our practice. So the number of referrals we've gotten, the number of people that convert, so to speak, or in other words, somebody that calls us and then they set an appointment. All of those things I track on Google Sheets or using Google Forms, those kinds of things. Also, there are a lot of other little perks to Google Workspace, like Google Keep as a way for me to kind of track reference materials, that kind of thing. Again, a lot more to go into it than I can in this particular episode. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/GWS course, which is the original Google Workspace for Therapists course, which goes over the basics of all the different tools of Google Workspace and some of the ways that you can use them in your practice. But also the new course, which is practiceoftherapy.com GWS platform, which tells you how to use those tools and then set them up in a platform for your practice. So the other thing that I use Google Workspace for is I've got a staff portal that I created using Google Sites. And it's just an internal web page that we use. You can go there and people can click on links to get to our TherapyNotes portal, also to our web page, to our forms. What are the other things that we've got links to there? We've got a local directory that I've set up for local therapists that we can refer out to, and other resources that are there. So it's just a portal that I set up for our staff to use. Also, our employee handbook, all of those kinds of things are all within that portal with quick links. So, anyway, getting back on track. So, getting back to the intake. So, Nikki contacts the people, or she talks to them directly, and she sets up our appointment. Now, the appointments are all set up in TherapyNotes. And let me explain why I'm using TherapyNotes and Google Workspace. The one thing about TherapyNotes that I absolutely love is that it's also linked to a clearinghouse. And with our practice, since we're insurance based, all of the insurance claims are filed through TherapyNotes, and that we set up the patient's biographical information. We do our documentation. All of that sort of thing is handled through TherapyNotes. In other words, the whole clinical side of our practice is managed through TherapyNotes. Now, there is a little bit of overlap with that in that there are some forms that we have in Google Workspace, but we primarily we use TherapyNotes. So if a new person comes to us and we ask them to do the intake information, we send them to the TherapyNotes portal. We send them an email that gives them access to the TherapyNotes portal. They fill out all of their intake paperwork online through TherapyNotes. And then we do all of the individual patient billing through TherapyNotes. And so all of that clinical stuff, again, is handled through TherapyNotes, which our staff loves it. I can also, within TherapyNotes, run some various reports looking at the number of sessions we've had. Also look at, our accounts receivable. In other words, what insurance companies owe us, all of those kinds of things. Now, as far as the filing of the individual insurance claims, I've got that outsourced as well through Practice Solutions. So one of the things you run into with insurance companies and taking insurance is that it's, as much as I'd like for it to be seamless, which for the most part, I would say 80 to 90% of the time it is pretty seamless. We enter the information in TherapyNotes, we fill out our progress notes or our session notes and do all of those things. And once we've saved those things, TherapyNotes has built into that to set up the claim to be sent. So what Practice Solutions does is they go in and they look at all of that information to make sure that the claims are ready to be sent in. But also on the back end, they're the ones that do the follow-up if there's a problem with the claim or the insurance company rejects the claim for any reason. All of those things are very time-consuming, and so I've got that outsourced. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a solo practice and you have the time to do those things, you can do all of that in conjunction with TherapyNotes. But for our size practice, it's much more cost efficient for us to outsource that. So anyway, we do a session note, we enter that in, we save the note is locked in TherapyNotes, and then every week Practice Solution goes in and they scrub the plane. Actually, the software scrubs the claim, but they follow through on all of that on the back end with the billing of insurance. Also, what they do, which is another thing that you run into with insurance practices, is a lot of times we might not know what the copay is for clients. They send out statements to clients that still owe us money. So also the way we've got things structured is that each individual therapist within our practice sets their own schedule, and they also are made aware of when clients owe us money or we need to collect a copay. So they're notified about that, and they follow up that. We follow up individually with each client. about what they owe us, if they owe a copay or not. So again, on the collection side of things, which really overlaps into the business side of things, it's TherapyNotes is a wonderful platform for handling all of that. The other thing that's nice is within TherapyNotes is it's got a telehealth portal that can be used to do sessions with people. Back during COVID, we were using several different ones because, internet connections can vary from one place to another, and some of us working at home, some of us in the office, that kind of thing. We were using a combination of DoxyMe, again, it's just doxy.me, and they had a free version that you could do telehealth with. Again, all of these platforms are HIPAA secure. The downside of the free version of doxy.me is that you could only see one client at a time. So if you had a couple, they couldn't log in from separate locations. They'd have to be in the same room together. The other one we used is Google Meet, again, part of the Google Workspace platform. And then we were starting to use the telehealth portal within TherapyNotes, but it was we had our system down around communicating with clients about telehealth sessions. And also I had created just a template within Gmail so that when it was time for their session, we'd send them a pre-made email that had all the links in it and that sort of thing. So, okay, so they schedule a session, we have the session, we do our documentation in TherapyNotes, we collect from them and enter that information in TherapyNotes. Going back to the intake, we use phone.com as our phone service that is HIPAA secure. Let's see, I'm trying to think of all the different tools that we use. The other tool that we use for faxes is a service called SFax. Again, it's a HIPAA secure online fax service that we use. There are several others out there. I liked SFax. It was one of the first ones I discovered, and it's just we've gotten used to using it. So if we need to fax providers or fax things to people, that's what we use is SFax for that. So our intake order gets everybody set up, gets the initial information, gets the clients to sign the forms online through TherapyNotes. Then they pay us, and the individual client payment records are all handled through TherapyNotes. But on the business side of things, I need to be able to track the business side of things. So I do that in a combination of using Google Sheets. I have different ways to track what we bring in through Google Sheets, but also I use QuickBooks as my main accounting software. So one of the things about using QuickBooks, though, is you have to be careful about not using client names. So in QuickBooks, if we receive a payment from a client, I've just got it labeled as a client payment. Or if it's a payment from insurance companies, and I've got the individual insurance companies listed in there as customers. Again, a lot of information too much information to go into around QuickBooks. But again, just thinking about the money side of things, I do, again, have a course out there called Money Matters in Private Practice. And it goes into the whole accounting side and financial side of running a private practice. And you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/money matters. But anyway, what I was going to say is we collect from the patient. We are the client, and we enter that in TherapyNotes. And then we have TherapyNotes has a way to just a built-in credit card management system in there as well through Card Merchant, I think it is. But all of that, when somebody swipes a card and we collect from a patient, it just goes directly into the bank. And so, again, it's very hands-free. And so with QuickBooks, I'm then able to go in and download from the bank the payments we've received. And the one thing about QuickBooks is that it recognizes who the payment is from, and it automatically puts it into the right account within QuickBooks. And that's one of the benefits of using a dedicated accounting software like QuickBooks. You could also set up some Google Sheets, but one of the things is once you start growing, you really want to use something like QuickBooks or FreshBooks. Again, use what your accountant might recommend for you to use. QuickBooks is kind of the gold standard about that with those kinds of things. But anyway, we collect the payments from the clients throughout about once a week. I go into QuickBooks, download from the bank the payments that we've received either from credit cards or insurance companies. Again, one of the things about structure, the more you can have things set up on direct deposit, the less you have to handle it. We still have a few insurance companies and vendors that send us checks directly. So I'll go through, and we have clients that write checks. So about once a week or every other week, I'll go in and get those checks and make a deposit and take it to the bank. But again, all of that's entered into QuickBooks. And let's see, what else? So with discharge from clients, again, all of that is a clinical kind of thing, and we handle that through TherapyNotes, do the discharge plans. Also, I didn't mention treatment plans are done in TherapyNotes. And so, so that's basically the structure. We do it from intake to discharge. We handle our intakes and do the intake paperwork through TherapyNotes. Sometimes we have people that aren't as computer savvy, and we do have forms that we can send to them, paper forms, and we can mail those to folks. Once we do the intake with them in the office or online, we start entering our clinical notes and clinical documentation into TherapyNotes. Communication is handled through either Google Gmail or through SFAX if we need to communicate with referral sources, that kind of thing, or send any documents out. Let's see, am I missing anything? Practice Solutions does the follow-up on our insurance claims, but all of the insurance claims are generated automatically in TherapyNotes for if we're filing insurance. Oh, the other thing that I get questions about are just about payment and your pricing structure. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that before we kind of wrap things up here. One of the things that we, of course, being insurance-based, is that what we get paid is based on our individual contracts with each insurance company. And so it varies to some degree depending on our provider contract with those insurance companies. And right now we've just got a handful that we're credentialed with: Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, Aetna, Humana, TRICARE, Amerigroup, I'm leaving some United Healthcare, Behavioral, or Optum. Those are some of the different insurance companies that we're credentialed through, either individually, the individual providers, or as a group. But what do we do? One of the things that we offer to people, if they don't want to use their insurance or they don't have insurance, we have a sliding scale. And it's just a 3-tier sliding scale. Our full price is at the top tier of that, full price for our practice. Then there's a middle thing there, and then a lower one. Here's the hot tip on this. Our lowest tier on that sliding scale is the average of our insurance our insurance reimbursement rate. So think about that. You can create a sliding scale, and so what that helps me with is when I run my numbers or whatever, I have an average reimbursement rate that I know that I'm going to get from insurance companies. And so the lowest tier on our sliding scale is equal to that amount. So that's one reason why it's important to know your numbers, is to figure those things out. And what we do is that we have to accept people's insurance if we are credentialed with that insurance company. That's part of our contract. But if we are not credentialed with that insurance company, we don't necessarily have to take that. So that's why we offer that sliding scale. The other thing, too, is that there are people out there that don't want to use their insurance to pay for services, particularly when they know that we have to give them a diagnosis if we file insurance, and they might not want that. So we offer them the sliding scale. So the other quick tip on insurance, on filing insurance, is when you file an insurance claim, always put your full price on that insurance claim, not the contracted rate, because the insurance company is going to pay you what they're going to pay you based on your contract rate, but always submit the full amount. And that's kind of a standard practice across the board in filing insurance claims. So, doctors' offices do the same thing. So the services that I use for my practice are, again, phone.com for my phone service, use Google Workspace for email and documentation, not clinical documentation, but like writing letters, all of those kinds of things. Also use Google Drive for some non-clinical file storage, all of that kind of thing is used in there. Again, you can check out the courses that I've created talking about how to use those different things. And then TherapyNotes we use for the clinical side of things in terms of patient documentation, clinical notes, also having a place to store intake forms, all of those kinds of things is all done within TherapyNotes. We use SFax for fax service. We use Card Merchant through TherapyNotes. It's built into TherapyNotes for swiping credit cards. I use QuickBooks for my accounting software as far as entering what our general income and expenses and all of that sort of thing are done through that. So there's so much more I could cover here and just not enough time. One other thing I use that I'll mention here that's more related to the business side is Gusto. And Gusto is the payroll service I use. And that is where I enter our payroll twice a month to pay my clinicians. And also through Gusto, we are able to get our health insurance for those that need health insurance, all through Gusto. And you can go to practiceoftherapy.com/Gusto, and you can find out more about that. Full disclosure, that's an affiliate link. So if you sign up for Gusto through that link, I do get a commission at no extra cost to you. So that's another quick tool there. So boy, that was enough. That was a lot for this episode. I'd love to get your feedback on this episode and questions that you have. And you can email me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com. I love getting feedback from people. And also be sure to follow us wherever you're listening to the podcast. So anyway, thanks for joining this particular episode. Well, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode as I hopefully gave you an explanation of just kind of my structure and how to one particular way to structure your practice. There are a lot of moving pieces, obviously, in a practice. And as you move into group practice, there are even more moving pieces. But one of the things I'll say just in closing is spend some time on creating some systems and processes that make sense to you. And whichever platforms or softwares you choose to use, just make sure they make sense to use. I'm, of course, a big fan of TherapyNotes, but they're not the only ones out there. But I would say compare. But I can honestly say that TherapyNotes is not one I'm going to switch from anytime soon. And they're also a sponsor for this particular podcast, which I'm very grateful for. And you can check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Also use the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and you can get 2 months of their services for free. So you can try them out for 2 months. And again, all the other resources I mentioned are in the show notes here for this particular episode. Also, be sure and check out the Google Workspace resources that I've got out there. I've got the Google Workspace for Therapists course. Again, practiceoftherapy.com/GWS course. And then also practiceoftherapy.com/GWS platform, which is the course that's in the pre-launch that you can get a discount on as I'm recording this, which just goes into more detail than the original course on creating platforms. So, boy, that was a lot. And be sure and check out the Enneagram course that's coming up. And again, you can find links in the show notes here for that. So that's a lot, folks. And thanks again for joining me for this particular episode of the Practice of Therapy. And be sure and take time to follow us wherever you might be listening to the podcast, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or Stitcher or Amazon Music or even Audible now. There are a ton of ways to listen to podcasts anymore, but take time to follow us and also leave us a review. I love getting honest feedback about the podcast, and give us a rating, and that just helps other people find us. So hopefully this has been a helpful episode to you folks, and take care. And we'll be talking to you next week. We've got some exciting guests lined up, so I'm looking forward to you hearing from them. Take care. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.